In 2023, Benin City became the stage for one of the most serious confrontations between two rival groups, the Vikings and the Blackaxe. The tension was especially high in the New Benin area, a busy part of the city where people were used to noise and movement, but not the kind of fear that was about to spread through the streets. It began like many conflicts do, from something small. One afternoon, a member of the Blackaxe and a member of the Supreme Vikings confraternity had a disagreement. At first, it was only an argument, the kind that could have ended with harsh words and both men walking away. But pride, anger, and the presence of onlookers pushed it further. Voices were raised, insults were exchanged, and very quickly the argument turned into a physical confrontation. Before long, the Viking member overpowered the Blackaxe member. Some people who claimed to have seen everything said it was not just one Viking member involved, but more than one, and that they joined in and beat the Blackaxe member until he could no longer defend himself. By the time it ended, the Blackaxe member was badly hurt and had to be rushed to the hospital. News of the incident spread fast through both groups. In Benin City, word travels quickly, especially when it involves known faces and respected figures. Members of both sides began to gather, talking in low tones in corners of streets, in bars, and in small shops. For a short while, it seemed like the city itself was holding its breath. People expected something worse to follow immediately, but what happened next surprised many. Leaders and senior members from both confraternities stepped in. They knew that if the situation was not controlled, it could lead to something much more dangerous, not just for their members but for ordinary people living and working in New Benin. Through talks and negotiations, they managed to reach a peace arrangement. As part of the agreement, the Vikings accepted responsibility for what had happened and agreed to pay the hospital bills of the injured Blackaxe member. To outsiders, this looked like a mature solution. It gave the impression that both sides wanted to prevent further trouble. After the agreement, there was a sense of calm on the surface. People said the matter had been settled, and life in New Benin slowly began to look normal again. But beneath that calm, not everyone was satisfied. Inside the Blackaxe, some members were deeply unhappy with the peace deal. To them, seeing their member in bandages, recovering from serious injuries, was a constant reminder of the humiliation they believed he had suffered. They felt that money for hospital bills was not enough. In their minds, true balance could only be restored if the other side felt the same kind of pain and loss. These were the voices that did not support the agreement, the ones who sat together in hidden corners, whispering that the response had been too soft. As days passed, the bitterness in this small group grew stronger. They watched the streets, observed the movement of the Vikings, and waited. Then they made their decision. Without the approval of everyone in their confraternity, a few of them chose to act on their own. They identified a target, a well-known member of the Vikings, someone who had once been a leader in his area, a man respected and feared in equal measure. To them, he was not just another member, he was a symbol. If something happened to him, it would send a clear message. One day, when they were sure he was within their reach and not surrounded by too much protection, they moved. The atmosphere was tense but controlled. They approached him with a clear intention, to make sure he would not walk away untouched from what they believed was an insult to their group. Witnesses later said it all happened very quickly. There was no long argument, no attempt to talk things over. The Blackaxe members carried out their plan with focus and determination. By the time it was over, the prominent Viking member had been taken down and did not recover from the attack. Word of his fall spread through Benin City even faster than news of the first fight. People spoke in hushed tones about how a former leader of the Vikings had become the first casualty of the growing conflict. For many residents, this was the moment they realized that the earlier peace deal had only covered the surface. Deep inside, anger and resentment had been waiting, and now they had finally broken through. The clash between the Vikings and the Blackaxe in New Benin was no longer just a simple misunderstanding, it had become something much more serious, with consequences that no one could fully predict. The Viking members who had worked hard to secure the peace deal felt deeply betrayed when they heard what had happened to their former leader. Many of them had put their pride aside, spoken to their own men, and convinced them to come down for the sake of peace in Benin City. They believed that agreeing to pay the hospital bills of the injured Blackaxe member was a fair way to settle the matter and avoid further trouble. But when news reached them that a respected Viking figure had been deliberately targeted and taken down by some Blackaxe members who rejected the peace, something in them snapped. To the Vikings, this was not just an attack on one man, it was an insult to their entire group and a clear sign that their attempt at peace had been taken for weakness. Anger spread among them like fire. Small meetings began to take place in hidden corners, in parked cars at night, in quiet streets where only trusted members were allowed. Voices were low, but the emotions were intense. Some of the younger ones were the loudest, saying that if they did nothing, people would stop respecting them. Older members, including those who had helped negotiate the peace deal, felt both ashamed and furious. They had stuck their necks out to calm their men, only for the other side to break the agreement in such a public and brutal way. Before long, a decision was made: they would respond. They would go into the streets of Benin and look for someone from the Blackaxe who could be used as an example, someone whose fate would show that the Vikings were not to be taken lightly. A group of Viking members, focused and charged with emotion, moved out together. They were not wandering aimlessly, they were on a mission. People later described how you could feel the tension in the air that day, especially around certain parts of the city. Faces were watched more carefully. Strangers were studied longer. Everyone seemed to know that something was building, even if they could not see it directly. It was during this tense period that they came across a man known as Odon, a well-known Blackaxe member. Odon was not a nameless figure in the area. He was a married man, and his wife had only recently given birth. At home, he was known as a caring husband and a new father trying to balance his responsibilities on the street with the needs of his young family. To his friends, he was that kind of person who could switch from jokes and laughter to serious discussions in a second. To his group, he was loyal and active. On the morning that would change everything, Odon prepared to go to work like any other day. Some of his fellow Blackaxe members had heard that the Vikings were angry and moving around the city. They tried to reach him, calling his phone to warn him to stay indoors and avoid certain areas. But for reasons nobody fully understood, his phone could not be reached. Maybe the battery was low, maybe the network failed at the wrong moment, or maybe he was already on the move and did not notice the calls. Whatever the reason, the warning never got to him. He left his house, not knowing that a group of Viking members was already in the streets, searching. As fate would have it, their paths crossed at a place known as Lucky Way in Benin, a name that would sound painfully ironic by the end of the day. Witnesses later said that the Vikings recognized him quickly. There was no long conversation, no attempt to talk things out. They had already made up their minds about what needed to be done. Odon was confronted and overpowered there at Lucky Way. He did not make it back home. By the time the news reached his house, his wife was left in shock, holding a baby that would grow up hearing stories about a father who never came back from work one ordinary day. News of what happened to Odon spread quickly among Blackaxe members. The pain and anger they felt were immediate and intense. Some members saw it as a direct answer to what had happened to the former Viking leader, almost like an exchange. But others did not think in such calm terms. To them, it was simple: one of their own had been taken from them, a man with a young child and a family, and there had to be a reply. The street logic of, they touch one of ours, we must touch one of theirs, became the loudest voice in their meetings. Not long after, another Viking member was marked as a target. He was not just picked at random, they knew who he was and where he usually passed. A group from the Blackaxe moved to intercept him. When they finally caught up with him, they tried to do to him what had been done to Odon and their earlier victim. There was a struggle, and it looked like the Viking member would not survive the encounter. However, fate worked differently this time. Local security operatives, who had already been on alert because of the rising tension in the area, moved quickly when they noticed what was happening. Whether they had been tipped off or just happened to be nearby was unclear, but their presence changed everything. They stepped in and broke up the attack before it could reach the point of no return. The Viking member was badly shaken and injured, but he survived. He was taken away from the scene and given the help he needed. For ordinary people living in Benin City, especially around Lucky Way and other hotspots, these events were frightening. What had started as a disagreement between two individuals had grown into a chain of retaliation that now involved families, leaders, and whole communities. People began to walk faster, talk less in public, and keep their children indoors more often. Every loud sound made some hearts jump. The streets that were once filled with normal daily life now carried stories whispered in fear, stories of how one misunderstanding had turned into a dangerous cycle of revenge that nobody seemed able to stop. As the days went by, the tension between the two groups did not fade. Instead, it grew heavier, like a dark cloud hanging over Benin City. People could feel it even without seeing anything directly. Conversations in bars, on street corners, and in small shops kept returning to the same topic: who had been attacked, who was responsible, and what might happen next. Among the Vikings, there was still a strong desire to show that they would not back down. Some members felt that their group's name was being dragged in the mud, especially after the loss of their former leader and the growing whispers on the street. They believed that if they did not respond firmly, they would be seen as weak. In this atmosphere of anger and pride, another decision was taken. They picked out another young man they believed was linked to the Blackaxe. This young man had a simple life compared to the stories people told about secret meetings and street influence. He lived in a modest house with his family and was known more in his neighborhood as a quiet, respectful person. But to the Vikings who had marked him, he was more than that. They had been told he was part of the Blackaxe, and in their eyes, that was enough to make him a target. The Vikings did not go after him in a rush. They watched him, followed him from a distance, and traced his movements until they were sure of where he lived. It was not a random move, it was a planned visit. One day, they followed him back home and decided that this was the moment to act. The calm of his street was broken when they confronted him near his house. Neighbors later said the situation escalated quickly. Voices were raised, there was confusion, and before long the young man was overpowered. By the time it was over, he did not survive the attack. His home, which had once been a place of normal family life, became the center of grief and shock. When news of his passing reached members of the Blackaxe, anger and sorrow mixed together once again. But what made the situation even more complicated was the question of who the young man really was. The Vikings claimed that he was one of their rivals, a Blackaxe member who had been moving with their opponents and playing an active role in the ongoing conflict. However, Blackaxe members strongly denied this. To them, he was not part of their group at all. They said he was simply a brother to one of their members, a young man who had no direct involvement in their activities. According to their version of the story, the Vikings had made a mistake. They insisted that the real target had been his brother, who was the actual Blackaxe member. But instead of getting the brother, the Vikings had attacked the wrong person. This claim spread quickly and stirred strong emotions. Some people in the area supported this explanation, pointing out that the young man had rarely been seen in the company of non-Blackaxe members. Others were not so sure. The truth became another point of argument, another story told in pieces, depending on who was speaking. The Blackaxe, especially those who were already angry and impatient, saw the young man's death as another reason to respond. To them, it was not just about group rivalry anymore, it was about a family, about someone they believed was innocent. This made their anger burn even hotter. They decided that the Vikings needed to feel the weight of their actions once again. Not long after, a group of Blackaxe members moved into the market area in New Benin, a place that was usually full of traders, buyers, and everyday noise. That day, beneath the surface of normal activity, there was a hidden mission. They had identified a Viking member who was known in the area and watched his routine. When they saw their moment, they moved in. The market, with its stalls, shouting traders, and rushing customers, suddenly became the stage for another strike in the growing conflict. The Viking member was attacked in the middle of that busy environment and did not make it out alive. People ran, traders hid behind their goods, and some simply froze where they stood, unable to believe what they were seeing. But it did not end there. Still filled with anger, members of the Blackaxe went after two more individuals they believed had links to the Vikings. These two young men were not attacked in a crowded market but in separate locations, away from the eyes of large crowds. The Blackaxe members believed they were part of the Viking group or closely connected to them. The two young men were confronted and taken down in separate incidents. By the time word spread, 3 more families in the city were in mourning. The Vikings, however, responded with a different story. They denied that the two young men who were taken down after the market incident were their members. According to them, these young men were not registered or recognized as part of their confraternity. Instead, they explained that the only connection the two had to the Vikings was friendship. They admitted that the young men were seen in the company of Viking members from time to time, they drank together, moved around together, and were often seen in the same circles. But from the Vikings' perspective, friendship did not equal membership. They accused the Blackaxe of acting on suspicion and emotion instead of checking the facts. In their view, the Blackaxe were now targeting anyone who looked close to the Vikings, anyone who shared drinks, worked together in public, or was seen in photographs with them. This, they claimed, was unfair and reckless. Ordinary young men, they argued, were now in danger simply because of who they chose to hang around with. These different accounts added a new layer of confusion to the already tense situation. Among ordinary residents, fear deepened. People began to look more closely at who they greeted in public and who they spent time with. Parents started warning their sons to be careful about the company they kept. Some young men even tried to distance themselves from friends they thought might attract unwanted attention. In some parts of Benin City, especially around New Benin, every unfamiliar face was viewed with suspicion. Rumors became more powerful than facts. For some, it no longer mattered whether a person was truly a member of any group. Once someone was seen too often with certain people, stories would start. And in an environment where both sides felt wronged and were ready to reply at any time, stories alone could be enough to put a life at risk. What had started from a single misunderstanding and a single fight had now turned into a chain of actions and reactions, where every move led to another reply. The line between member, friend, and innocent bystander grew thinner with each passing day. And in the middle of it all, ordinary families in Benin City were left to deal with the fear, the whispers, and the quiet prayers that their loved ones would make it home each day. As the conflict continued, fear settled over Benin City like a shadow. People moved carefully, watched the streets, and tried to stay away from anything that looked like trouble. In this tense atmosphere, some members of the Blackaxe were said to have formed a hit squad. Angry and seeking revenge, they moved around different areas, targeting people they believed to be Viking members. During this period, several individuals were taken down, including a Kiki driver. To the Blackaxe hit squad, the Kiki driver was more than just a regular worker. They had seen him many times sitting with Viking members, sharing drinks and discussions. For them, that was enough to conclude that he belonged to the group. One day, while he was going about his normal work, they intercepted him. He did not return home. When the story spread, the Vikings family denied that he was one of their members. They explained that he was just a friendly man who liked to sit with them, relax, and have drinks, not a confraternity member. To them, this was proof that people were now being judged simply by the company they kept. Things became even more serious when local security operatives got involved. Some residents quietly believed that a few of these operatives were secretly loyal to the Blackaxe. Whether true or not, one incident made many people suspect it. A young Viking member known as Abo Benson, who was involved in the trade of illegal substances, was arrested by local security operatives. At first, it looked like a normal arrest, but instead of taking him to a station, they reportedly led him into a bushy area, away from the public. There, he was said to have been taken down on the spot. For the Vikings, this was not just an arrest gone wrong, it felt like a targeted attack under the cover of law and order. The Vikings reacted quickly. A hit squad from their side moved towards an area known as Back of Guinness in Benin City. There, they located 3 men they believed were Blackaxe members. The situation escalated, and the 3 men were taken down at the spot. The news of the attack spread fast, adding more fuel to an already dangerous fire. Soon after, Blackaxe leaders publicly denied that those 3 individuals were their members. According to them, the young men were not part of their confraternity but had only been seen with some of their people. They claimed that the Vikings, just like they had earlier accused the Blackaxe, were now targeting people based mainly on suspicion and association, not clear proof. By this point, one thing was clear: many of the people who lost their lives were not the real decision makers. Some were members, some were friends, some were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Families were left broken, children were left without fathers, and entire neighborhoods were shaken. What started from a simple disagreement had turned into a chain of revenge and mistakes that took many lives. In the end, the fracas in Benin City was remembered as a very sad and regrettable period. It showed how quickly anger and group loyalty can destroy lives and peace in a community. Let this story be a reminder and a warning. Say no to cultism, no to crime, and yes to peace. No temporary feeling of power or respect is worth the pain, tears, and lost lives that follow.